He owns and operates the Pack-A-Day podcast that airs 365 days a year with over 12 million views on YouTube. A new adventure begins. It's time for the Pack-A-Day radio show with Andy Herman on 1250 AM and 105.7 FM The Fan, powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook and on the free Odyssey app.
And you know what? That's just still not showing up yet today. Here's Hardman. Takes the handoff. Oh, somehow they missed him. He dives and he scores. Oh my goodness. How did that happen?
What's up, Milwaukee? Good morning. Happy Thursday. Welcome into the Pack-A-Day radio show live from the 1250 AM and 105.7 FM The Fan studios, powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. That was Mecole Hardman scoring a touchdown courtesy of CBS. Why is that important? Well, we'll talk about it momentarily. We've got Jacob Westendorf coming up at 8:20 a.m. today, Pack-A-Day podcast. You can also find him on Packers on SI. Would love for you to join the show. Nicolay Law Fan Talking text line is open, 414-677-1250. Again, 414-677-1250. Get those phone calls and text in. We'll have plenty of time for questions if you guys have anything that you want to go over. In a moment, we're going to be going over the most overrated Green Bay Packers. Yesterday, we did the most underrated. Players that made my underrated list yesterday include Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, Aaron Banks, Jordan Morgan, Rasheed Walker and Sean Ryan, Rashawn Gary, LVN, Edgerrin Cooper, Tyron Hopper, the cornerback trio, Javon Bullard, and of course, Matt LaFleur as well. If you want to check out that full episode, you can check it out over on the free Odyssey app or, of course, on thefanmilwaukee.com. As mentioned, we're going to be going over overrated Packers momentarily. But, Tommy, we had some interesting new listicles over on ESPN because it is that sort of season. First of all, there was a ranking of the Packers offseason, or a grading of everyone's offseason, I should say. How do you believe ESPN graded the Green Bay Packers offseason?
So I didn't look at the article, but I did see that this story came out this morning just by looking at the front page. I didn't see them in the header photo, so I'm going to say that they're going to be pretty middle of the road, whether that would have been avoiding the bottom or the top. How about B-, C+?
You are spot on, my friend. C+ was ultimately the grade that they gave the Packers. They said the biggest move was signing Aaron Banks. The move they liked the most was drafting Matthew Golden at pick 23. I used pick 22, right? Or was he pick 23? Yeah, it doesn't matter. Move that he disliked the most was signing Aaron Banks. So gave Green Bay a C+ overall. How do you feel? Is it fair? Unfair?
Yeah, I think that we talked about this a little bit last week and how this was just more of a stereotypical, prototypical Green Bay offseason, this offseason. You know, 2 offseasons ago, it was the big flashy Xavier McKinney and Josh Jacobs come into Green Bay. And this season, it was a lot more reliant on draft and develop, and we're going to go after our guys in the draft. And then on top of that, they made a couple of signings that were, you know, not necessarily the most highest profile guys to be at the free agent position, and Aaron Banks and Nate Hobbs. I think C+ is a fair rating.
Where do you think that ranks of the 32 teams?
Oh, gosh. They are always just so trigger happy to give A's. That's gonna be like 22nd, 25th, somewhere around there. They always give out
your
just
gut.
way
22
high
was
grades.
right on.
Yeah,
you were
okay.
right on with
Yes.
22. So 22 out of 32 teams. Obviously, I'm not going to go through and review every other team's offseason here to kind of compare it and contrast with each one. I think it's a little bit better than that. I think they went out and spent money, got a starting offensive lineman, what I think is going to be a good starting offensive lineman, upgraded from Josh Myers pretty significantly. Go and get a starting corner, which I think is going to be an upgrade from Eric Stokes pretty significantly. I like the draft. I think Matthew Golden's going to be a big piece for that offense. Got more depth along the offensive line. Another interesting wide receiver piece in Savion Williams. I think I'm a little bit higher on this offseason. I don't think it's anything like, oh my God, like you're saying, it's not Xavier McKinney and Josh Jacobs worthy, right? Although they did spend a similar amount of money this year as they did with those two players. I think sometimes you have to look at positional value as well. And I've kind of talked about this offseason already. Listen, Josh Jacobs and Xavier McKinney, phenomenal players. A lot of people would tell you running back, safety, maybe not more of the premium positions. You got to win in the trenches. You got to win from a pure coverage standpoint on the outside or in the slot. you have to pay a little bit more of a premium for those type of players. They kind of ate their vegetables a little bit with going and getting Aaron Banks. Those are never going to be super fun signings, going out and getting a really good, solid guard, right? You're not going to go home at night and be like, oh my goodness, you see what the Packers did today? And it's not going to be a water cooler conversation. Aaron Banks coming to Green Bay, everyone buckle up, Super Bowl bound. But I think sometimes like that and like the Anthony Belton move in the second round, it never is sexy when it happens, but man, are you happy to have those guys during the course of the season? Because we've seen if you've got a Byron Bell in there, if you've got a one of these players that just absolutely a Don Barclay, like your whole line just disintegrates in a moment. Even in the playoffs against Philly. Now Philly's got an unbelievable defensive front, right? But all of a sudden Travis Glover or Kadeem Telford are having to play in there and just everything falls apart. It just disintegrates right in front of your eyes. So it's never sexy in the moment, but those things are super important to do. And again, I do really like the Nate Hobbs signing as well. So I'm a little bit higher than ESPN on it, but I do think, again, an average 16th out of the 32 teams, B minus, B, C plus, I guess in that range is not the worst thing in the world, but I think I'm a little bit higher on it.
Where do they rank among the NFC North teams, Andy?
From ESPN standpoint?
Yeah, from the ESPN standpoint. I would assume the Bears are going to be a top 5 team. They always love what the Bears do in the offseason. But Minnesota obviously was pretty active in free agency, and Detroit ends up losing both coordinators. So I would just be curious if they are the worst-ranked NFC North team at 22.
All right, so the Lions are just a bit ahead of Green Bay with a B minus, and the Bears are just one spot ahead of Detroit with a B minus as well. They said they did not like the Grady Jarrett signing. They did like the hiring of Ben Johnson. And as far as the Minnesota Vikings, they are, let me see here, are at a C plus. So they are actually, they're 2 spots below Green Bay. They liked that they stuck with JJ McCarthy. They did not like the Jonathan Allen signing. So pretty much everyone in the NFC North kind of in that middling area. Nobody really standing out. I am surprised that they didn't have a higher grade on the Bears because like you said, it seems like the Bears win the offseason every single year.
I agree. And I also thought Minnesota would get a lot of praise too, just for their, I guess I would have thought Detroit would have been hurt a little more. There was that was the chance for Green Bay to be above them. You lose both coordinators and now you're relying a lot on Dan Campbell and really just running it back with the same team for the most part. You're going to get Aiden Hutchinson back and a couple other changes on the defensive side where DJ Reed comes in. But I still think that they struggled and got worse, right? So I don't know how you would have such a similar grade to Green Bay if you know Detroit's going to be worse than they were last year.
Says their biggest move was extending Kirby Joseph. The move they liked the most was signing DJ Reed, which is fine, but you lost Carlton Davis in that secondary. So it's kind of like a like-for-like replacement. Also lost their starting center, their starting right guard. That's going to be tough to replace. And even the moves they disliked the most were reaching for Tyreek Williams in the first round and trading a bunch of stuff in the third round. I think 3 third-round picks for Isaac Tesla. So I'm based on like how it reads, I'm very much surprised that it wasn't lower than some of the other ones on this list, including your Green Bay Packers. That was number 1. We also had some of the ones recently. Today's was ranking the top safeties. I don't know if you've looked at this one yet, but where do you think Xavier McKinney's coming in on this list?
He's got to be a top 5 safety in the league, right? I would say 4th.
He's slightly higher. He is number 3 on this list. Number 1, Kyle Hamilton, Baltimore Ravens. Number 2, Brian Branch of the Detroit Lions. And then number 3, Xavier McKinney of the Green Bay Packers, followed by Jesse Bates, Kirby Joseph, and Derwin James. Really solid list of safeties. Just a really good time to be a safety in the NFL. There's a lot of really good ones. Evan Williams did not get any sort of honorable mentions or anything like that. So just Evan Williams on that list, just Xavier McKinney on that list. And yes, I think that's probably fair. Based on his season the last couple years, actually, you could probably make an argument that he could even be slightly higher, but it's an argument at best. Kirby Joseph, Jesse Bates, Derwin James, phenomenal safeties. Antoine Winfield Jr. even at number 7. So it's a very competitive top 7. You could probably order those guys in a variety of different orders, and I wouldn't really have a problem with it. I think number 3 is a very fair ranking for Xavier McKinney.
Yeah, and he also plays that traditional free safety role, right? He's not a guy who is like a Kyle Hamilton who can move around and be a lot more fluid in that defense for Baltimore. McKinney is the guy who is playing back. He is making sure nothing gets over the top, and he actually got a lot of interceptions from it early on in the season. It slowed down because teams stopped testing it later on, I think, but I understand why he would be below both the names that we just had there between, you said it was Branch and Hamilton, right? So
Correct.
Both guys who I think are a little more involved in the tackling part of their game as well, and they are in the run-stopping game a little more than McKinney is. So I understand why their value would be a little bit higher.
Yeah, I can totally agree with that. I think McKinney has that versatility, but I think they just prefer using him back in the back end because he's just such an eraser on the back end. So, and you're totally correct in your point where he was just stacking up interceptions until teams like, yeah, let's not throw at him anymore because he's just going to pick it off basically every single time. So, they stopped throwing at him in a major significant way, which is also a cheat code to have in and of itself. If all of a sudden you're just taking away the part of the field that you're patrolling, it definitely makes things a bit more predictable for the offense as well. Defensive ends, not surprisingly, Tommy, nobody made it for Green Bay on the top 10 of this list. It was then a group of honorable mentions of 4 different players. So there was a top kind of 14 on this list. And then you had a smattering of players that were in the also receiving votes category, which Rashawn Gary did make that list. So there are 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21 defensive ends who receive votes in some capacity. Rashawn Gary received votes, but was not in the top 10 or the honorable mentions.
I mean, I think
that's fair.
If you told me Rashawn Gary's a top 20 edge rusher, like I think I can get behind that argument a whole lot more than top 10, obviously.
Totally agreed.
So, yeah, I think that's fair. Like a couple of extra people said, hey, give him some love because his numbers at the end of the year always work out. That's what we've been saying, or at least I've been saying to you now since we've had Rashawn Gary in a topic of conversation. It's just if you were to watch each and every Packer game, you will watch some games where you will say, where is Rashawn Gary?
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. And to me, there needs to be a bit more of an ability for Rashawn Gary to just affect the game a little bit more. If he wants to certainly get in that top 10, the honorable mention, just has to be more of a consistent ability to affect the game. It doesn't necessarily have to be just sacks. It can be pressures. It can be, and I did think he took a big step as a run defender this past year, which is, I think, maybe why he was even receiving some votes in the top 10 this past year. But yeah, I think just a little bit more ability to affect the game on a more consistent basis would help him work up that list a little bit more. The other one was defensive tackle. No Packers in the top 10, as you would expect. No honorable mentions. There were 5 honorable mentions. And then in the also receiving votes category, Kenny Clark, I don't know if this is ordered, but Kenny Clark was on the top of that list, along with Aleem McNeil, Ed Oliver, Deron Payne, Kalijah Cansey, and Oso Digizua. So he was in the vote category, but certainly not in the top 10 or the honorable mentions. And again, I think based on his play from a season ago, which we now know was injury riddled to say the least, I think that's also a very fair ranking for Kenny Clark.
Yeah, I actually love that for Kenny Clark. Like, I do think there is an arc in store for Kenny Clark this season, and the more doubt and hate that comes his way on not being a part of that list, when we're talking about when playing at their peak potential, their peak play, like Kenny Clark's a top 10 defensive tackle in this league. I think that's pretty comfortable, and he had his most disappointing season last season by far, not even close. But you're talking about a guy who got a second contract in the NFL. He's been a Pro Bowler. Is he have an All-Pro? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he made a second team, but he obviously was around when Aaron Donald and Chris Jones were playing at the same time too. But he was always in that conversation of that tier below, those elite players. I think he can be in the top 10. I think he's in store for a big bounce back this year.
3-time Pro Bowler, no time All-Pro, either first or second team. So definitely in that conversation in the past, like you said, it's been sort of a little bit of a golden age at defensive tackle with guys like Chris Jones, Aaron Donald, Dexter Lawrence more recently as well. So yeah, he has not been in that upper echelon category. It's interesting. Look at these defensive tackles. I think there is a way for him to get to the bottom, maybe 3 of this list if he had a big year. To me, Dexter Lawrence is number 1 and deservedly so. Chris Jones, he's probably not going to compete with. Jalen Carter at 3. Jeffrey Simmons, I think, is a little bit more up and down. I'm surprised he's a little bit this high. I'm a huge fan of Quinnen Williams for the Jets and Leonard Williams for the Seattle Seahawks. Nnamdi Madubuike for the Ravens had an unbelievable year 2 years ago. Definitely came back to life a little bit this past year. I think Madubuike, DeForest Buckner at 8, and Cam Hayward at 10 are ones that Kenny Clark, if he gets back to form, could compete with. Vita Vea at 9. I think the world of Vita Vea. There's still kind of some limitations to his game, but that bottom of that list, I think Kenny can absolutely compete with if he gets back to form.
Yeah, you said a lot of those names, and I was just thinking, I know Kenny Clark has had better years than those guys, right? And so I also agree that I think that while last year really is just staining a lot of Kenny Clark's name, and it should a little bit, because it was a very disappointing season from Kenny Clark's standpoints, and especially for expectations that this organization, this fan base has for Kenny Clark. So I think that if Kenny Clark is back to, a 4.5 sack season and getting pressure on the inside and able to work things a little bit more on the run defense side, I'd be really pleased with that. I think that because of how poor his season was last year, at the end of next season, we will be saying the most improved season was Kenny Clark.
I love that. I actually did a recent episode with Justice Mosqueda, and we did a draft. Maybe we'll do this at some point, Tommy. I won't spoil it because I think this would be fun for you and I to do. We did a draft of basically which players will have the better a high PFF grade comparison to a year ago.
Ooh,
so
okay.
We both drafted 5 players, and it was a really fun exercise. I'm going to kick Justice's butt, by the way. In this one, I am very confident in my selections. So once we do ours, maybe either tomorrow or coming up next week, I'll release my draft of Justice and I as well. But we'll do that, and it's a really fun exercise. And spoiler alert, I do think Kenny Clark can be one of those people who has a much higher grade this upcoming season. I'll also add on top of this, if he doesn't, it's very likely his last year in Green Bay.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any question about that. I think he's going to have a big season in order for him to justify the contract that he set up for in 2026. So big season for Kenny upcoming. I think we both expect that, believe that. But for some reason, if this is just the new reality of Kenny, where it's just like, it's fine, but it's not what we've been used to, probably his last year, or at least a major restructured contract if he's going to stay in Green Bay in 2026. Listen to the Pack a Day radio show live from the 1250 AM and 105.7 FM, the Fan Studios, and of course, powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. All right, as mentioned, Tommy, yesterday we went over our most underrated players. Today we're going to be going over the most overrated Green Bay Packers. So I know yesterday you kind of brought up Rashawn Gary. I don't know, you just said he's not underrated. I don't know if you feel like he's overrated, but who immediately comes to mind when I say overrated Green Bay Packers?
When I think overrated, Rashawn Gary would probably be the first name, and not really. That's just, again, he's a victim of his contract, and now on top of it, when you threw him in underrated, then I was like, whoa, Andy, you got to slow down there. I'm not on that board by any means. I don't want to sound negative with this as well, but the uncertainty of Keyshawn Nixon kind of makes me feel that way too, that he might be ready to be cornerback 1. And it's more of a, should we watch out for overrated on this, which maybe sounds like it's cheating, but that's a name that pops in my head too, where, Green Bay, they decided to part ways with Jair Alexander, and totally mutual, probably didn't want to be here either. And they didn't invest very heavily in the draft in that position either. So I'm really concerned that we could see Keyshawn Nixon as being overrated currently, not based on what his play has been. He is overrated. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think the Nixon conversation is kind of when we yesterday talked about Rasheed Walker and Sean Ryan maybe being underrated by the organization, and they're just like, they're good players, get them out there, and they deserve to be starting players. I think you could maybe make a similar conversation on the flip side with Keyshawn Nixon. I don't think there's any fans that are overrating Keyshawn Nixon and being like, yeah, Keyshawn's great. We're so excited for him to be, in that starting, outside corner. I think he's going to be fine. I really do. But I do wonder if the Packers are overrating that trio of corners internally a little bit. Listen, they have told us all offseason that they believe in Hobbs, Valentine, Nixon. And sometimes they will say things that are hollow and don't strike true, and then don't really back it up with their actions. They've backed it up the entire time. They have not drafted anyone until Micah Robinson in the 7th round. Nate Hobbs was basically signed to replace Eric Stokes, but they did not go out and sign another free agent. They didn't even bring back like a veteran like a Corey Ballantyne to be kind of a backup. They're like, we wholeheartedly believe in this trio of Hobbs, Valentine, and Nixon, and Javon Bullard as a slot option as well. They pushed all their chips in the center and said they're all in. So yeah, I think the Packers could internally be overrating those players, because I think there needs to be another piece there, another depth signing, another piece of competition for a team that loves competition and will preach about it in every single press conference known to man. They really at corner were like, no, we're just going with these 3 guys, and we trust them, and we don't need any other competition whatsoever. And it's an interesting 3 to put that level of belief in. I'll absolutely agree with you there. We're going to go. Oh, go ahead.
On the offensive side, I'll say Luke Musgrave. I'm also worried in the same exact boat. I'm super cool with Tucker Kraft just taking every single rep at tight end. I saw Luke Musgrave 2 seasons ago. He looked like he had some versatility and the vertical threat ability, but anytime he caught the ball, he fell down too. So people remember that easily. And then, again, Tucker Kraft did nothing wrong to lose any sort of playing time or reps, in my opinion. So I'm worried that Luke Musgrave steals some of those from Tucker Kraft this year.
I don't think Luke Musgrave is stealing a single snap from Tucker Kraft. I think Tucker Kraft's going to be more involved in 2025 than he was even in 2024. There might be games where instead of him having to play like 60 snaps or whatever, that maybe they're just toning it down to get him to more like 50, which is more reasonable, and maybe Musgrave snipes a couple of those or whatever. I think that has less to do with Musgrave and more to do with like, hey, we need to watch the wear and tear a little bit on our tight end and make sure that he's not out there, 60, 70 snaps per game. All right, we went in different directions. I'm going to go through these kind of lightning round. Here's my overrated players. Malik Heath is number one on my, not in any order, but there's a hive of Malik Heath stands. I like Malik Heath, but man, he's going to have to work his butt off just to try to make a number 6 wide receiver spot. There's probably one spot between Heath, Hardman, and Bo Melton. Bo Melton's now adding corner and special teams versatility to his resume. McCole Hardman is potentially a top punt returner, and Malik Heath doesn't have that, other than maybe being a blocking receiver on the outside, a little bit more of a possession receiver. He doesn't have that special teams or that other thing that's kind of going for him. So I think he's going to have a tough time making this team. McCole Hardman, we talked about this the other day, Tommy, maybe a couple weeks ago now it was, but if I told you that McCole Hardman this past year had 27 catches for 214 yards and 0 touchdowns, you'd probably be like, all right, I probably need to pump the brakes a little bit on maybe my expectations for McCole Hardman. If I told you over the past 2 years he had 27 for 214 and no touchdowns, you'd probably be like, ooh, that's not great. Tommy, over the past 3 years combined, this man has 27 catches for 214 yards, well under 10 yards per catch, 0 touchdowns. He does have a couple rushing touchdowns, one of those we played earlier, but he has not been anything as a wide receiver. So punt returner, quite possibly. Gadget guy, quite possibly. But as a pure wide receiver, he hasn't done anything in the last couple years. And I think we need to pump the brakes a little bit on expectations for McCole Hardman, although he did have a fantastic mini camp. This is my controversial one, Zach Tom. Listen, I love Zach Tom. Amazing player, but I think people are putting him in that all-pro conversation. I'm not quite there. I think he's a Pro Bowl caliber player, one of the best players on the team, one of the best offensive linemen in football, but not quite in that, let's just say like David Bakhtiari category where we're talking all-pro year in and year out, or at least should be all-pro year in and year out. I think there's some deficiencies from a run blocking standpoint. He's not a people mover, and I don't think he deals always with power the best. We've seen some struggles with guys like Aiden Hutchinson. So phenomenal player, just not quite in that top 5-ish of offensive tackle category, at least yet. Other ones, Kingsley and Igbare. I think there's a real chance that Igbare might get released or traded. Devontae Wyatt, nothing to do with his overall, but played 366 snaps in 15 games this past year. That's 20-ish, 22 snaps per game. If you want to be a $15 million a year player, which he's going to be next year, you got to play more than that. So I want to see a little bit more. Isaiah Simmons, there's this buzz about Simmons. Listen, if you go watch his tape, really fun special teams player in general, you really don't want this guy on defense. Quarterback spy, blitzer here and there. I am excited to see what Jeff Hafley can do with them, but I think, again, we need to kind of pump the brakes on expectations for Isaiah Simmons just a little bit. Kalen King, 7th round pick, cut last year. 6th corner, probably at best in a weak corner team right now. And this is a player that even once he was on the practice squad, Kamal Haddon gets brought in from the Chiefs midway through well after they brought in Kalen King, and Haddon even was active on game days before Kalen King was. So I think, again, somebody that's going to have to really work to make the team. And then Daniel Whalen, I really liked him early in the season, but was really inconsistent in the second half of the year. So that is my list of overrated players. We are going to get to Jacob Westendorf here in just a moment. We'll ask him his most underrated and overrated Packers as well. We have 66 and sunny currently in Milwaukee, high of 76 today. The low is right now at that 66 degrees. We'll be right back with Jacob Westendorf. This is the Pack a Day Radio Show powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. Welcome back to the Pack a Day Radio Show, live from the 1250 AM and 105.7 FM The Fan Studios, powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook. Reminder that the Mason Crosby Show with Mitch Thunder Nellis is coming up next from 9 to 11. Also, make sure to join Packers all-time leading scorer Mason Crosby and Hall of Fame wide receiver Jordy Nelson at the Beloit Brouhaha Softball Slam, a charity softball game on July 27th at ABC Supply Stadium. It'll feature football legends and Wisconsin and Illinois celebrities to raise money for Make-A-Wish Wisconsin. Register for your chance to win at thefanmilwaukee.com. Joining us now on the Fan Guest Hotline, powered by Gruber Law, is the one, the only, Jacob Westendorf, who right now is on camera and is looking cooler than I have ever looked in the entire history of my life. You can find him on social media at Jacob Westendorf. Jacob, how the heck are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I figure with this thing being in Milwaukee, I'm live from the Harley Davidson studio. So that's the best I could do for the given day. But yeah, it's good to be here. It's this close to camp. We're getting there. It's almost like the night before Christmas, but it's not the night before. I don't have a better analogy than that.
You're all good. I appreciate that. I have to ask, is that your motorcycle, or are you the guy that just found a really cool motorcycle and just kind of leaned up against it and be like, yeah, it's definitely mine?
Yeah, no, it is mine. I've had it for almost 2. Brandon Snide actually sold this to me once upon a time. So if anybody's familiar with that name, but yeah, Brandon sold this to me.
Brandon's good people. I absolutely love that. And you can pull off the backwards hat sunglasses, Harley, much better than I would ever have an opportunity to do. So I appreciate that about you, Jacob Westendorf. All right, we've had a conversation the last couple days about most overrated and most underrated Green Bay Packers. So I will ask you, who, when I say underrated or overrated, you can go in any direction that you want, from a fan base perspective, from a contract perspective, from a team perspective, however you want to view it. Who are the most overrated and underrated Green Bay Packers in your eyes? Nope. Did we lose Jacob? Think we might have lost Jacob. We'll try to get him back on. Give it one second. We maybe had internet disconnection there. My apologies for the tech. Westendorf. We will effort to get him back on here in just a moment. We got Tommy in his place. Tommy, we obviously went through the listicles earlier, the overrated, underrated. I want to go back to Luke Musgrave for a moment, because I was actually going to ask Jacob about him as well. And you kind of brought up him as potentially this overrated player. One of the things that I have talked about with Luke Musgrave is the idea of Luke Musgrave is better than what we've actually seen. Do you know what Musgrave's stats were this past year?
I mean, he barely played. Did he have 5 catches?
He had 7 catches for 45 yards, a 6.4 yard average, and a long of 19 yards. Even when he did get out there, he had very minimal impact and really struggled to kind of get going. It sounds like we might have Jacob Westendorf back. We'll ask him about. I have you now.
Yeah, sorry guys. I don't know what happened there.
Oh, you're totally good. It's probably on Tommy's end. We just blame him for everything when anything goes wrong. So you always have to have a fall guy. You know that, Jacob. I'm just kidding. Tommy's amazing. Most overrated and underrated Packer. We'll get back to that conversation.
Yeah, so I don't like to look at the contracts. I think one of the biggest downfalls of sports fandom is talking, and I understand that you have to do that in a salary capped sport and everything like that, but Rashawn Gary is not a bad player because he's paid a really good one. That's just kind of how the market goes, for example. So if I'm basing this on just the stuff I see underrated, I know this is going to sound maybe a little wild, but I think Keyshawn Nixon fits the bill, because if you read my, anytime you say something good about Nixon, you would think he's the worst cornerback in football. And number one, all the people who matter.
Uh-oh. We may have lost Jacob again. Might just have a poor internet connection. We will maybe try to get Jacob on again.
We'll call him. Let me give him a call. We'll just call him.
Yeah, we'll call him. All right. We'll try to get him on maybe just via phone calls rather than some internet connection. So, the interesting thing about Keyshawn Nixon, as Jacob brought him up, obviously Tommy had him on his overrated list. He was a part of the trio on kind of my underrated list. I tend to relate a little bit more with Jacob here, and it, again, has a lot more to do with the idea that Nixon is just this awful, really bad corner. I think that, to me, is where I come out on the opposite end. I think anytime anyone's bet against Keyshawn Nixon, he's basically proven everyone wrong. He was a 1-year vet minimum signing, $0 signing bonus, and was able to turned that into a 2-time first-team All-Pro kick returner. And then nobody thought he could be a corner that played consistently, and he became a starting slot corner, which I did think he struggled with. I don't think there's any question with that. But they moved him to outside corner this past year, and he really played well. So to me, I'm excited to see what Keyshawn Nixon can do this upcoming season. All right, Jacob, I think we have you back on the phone now. We got you a better connection?
Yes, we do. I think I figured out what the problem is, and it's one I can't control. So control the controllables, as Matt LaFleur might like to say. But we were talking Nixon, I think, before I got dumped, right? Okay, yeah. So if you went through everything, anytime you say something nice about him, you think he was the worst cornerback in football. But the people who matter, Jeff Hafley clearly believes in him. Matt LaFleur clearly believes in him. They've been complimentary about him almost unprompted throughout the offseason program. And then Brian Gutekunst as well. And then by the team's actions, they believe in him as well. Like you said, they brought in Nate Hobbs, but that was really it as far as significant additions to that cornerback room. And listen, is Keyshawn Nixon going to make people forget about the days of prime Jair Alexander? No. But like you mentioned, I think I saw a couple weeks ago, Andy, your grades from when they moved him from the slot, which he did struggle with. I think you were just saying that.
Yep.
But when they moved him from there to the outside, he was legitimately better. Again, do you want him matched up one-on-one with the game on the line against, Devontae Adams or Justin Jefferson or one of these great receivers? Probably not. Can you probably be better in that spot? Yes. Is he a complete absolute liability and this team's going to give up 500 passing yards because he might be their best cornerback? No, that's not true either. I mean, I will remind everybody that the Super Bowl champions had their least productive game offensively against this very same Packers secondary, plus Nate Hobbs minus Eric Stokes that's going to line up week 1 against the Detroit Lions. So I think Nixon is a good candidate for underrated. He brings some value to special teams, like you mentioned, as a kick returner. He's actually really good when he gets an opportunity and holds on to the ball. That was a bit of an issue last year for some reason. But when he does that, he's pretty good at it. He's a really good run defender, which I know nobody cares about run defense, especially in the secondary, but he is really good at that. And he's probably their best blitzer as a defensive back. I know he had at least 2 forced fumbles a season ago, one against Minnesota that kind of got them back into that game. So I think that Nixon is one who fits the bill. Again, I'm not going to say he's an elite corner. He's not even CB1, as he might have said in his exit interview last year. But as far as underrated goes, I think he certainly fits that bill because he's not a liability. He's a solid starting corner, which there's not a lot of those guys in this league.
You mentioned that tweet that I put out on my grades for Keyshawn Nixon from 2023 through the first 4 weeks of 2024 when he was primarily playing in the slot, had a negative 4.0 grade on him. From week 5 through the end of the season when he was primarily playing on the outside, had a plus 1.55 grade on him. So just a massive difference. He just felt much more confident. And Jacob, if you just look at his athletic profile, not the shiftiest guy, I shouldn't say shifty. We see him as a kick returner being shifty, but not the most agile guy, fluid of hips. The 3-cone, the agility test, he was not great at the combine. Great straight line speed guy. You would think hey, that looks to me like an outside corner, and they move him out there, and it definitely felt like he found his spot a lot more than in the slot.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, that side-to-side stuff, I don't want him matched up with, the Cooper Kupps in his prime and the guys like that can move those two-way goes as quickly as they can. But again, on the outside, there's a little more protection on the boundary. You'll have some guy named Xavier McKinney might be behind you on a given play too. So that certainly is something that helps you there. So I think Green Bay's in an okay spot at cornerback. The problem, of course, being, they're one rolled ankle away from playing a guy who hasn't played NFL snaps. So, and it's not like, Carrington Valentine's been dinged through his first 2 seasons. Nate Hobbs has had some issues with injuries. Nixon hasn't really been hurt, but it's football. There's a 100% injury rate. So the concern about depth, the concern about the top tier quality of that cornerback room, I understand. But when Gutekunst says they feel confident in the 3 guys that are there, I understand it. It's just, you feel like you could have gotten better in those spots. I certainly can understand that as well.
No, I think so too. All right, so we went over our underrated Packers. We'll be joined by Jacob Westendorf. You can find him on social media at Jacob Westendorf, Pack-A-Day Podcast, and of course, Packers on SI as well. So, all right, now that we have you underrated, who is your most overrated Green Bay Packer?
So I heard you say Zach Tom when I was waiting to jump on here, and I do think that is interesting depending on the lens that you look at it through. Is he really good? Yeah, absolutely. Is he going to get paid? Yeah. Should they pay him? Absolutely.
Yep.
Is he Lane Johnson? No. Is he Penei Sewell? No. I think that there are times where collectively we kind of get stuck in this is our guy and he's really good. So he's better than maybe what he is, and that could be a byproduct of just not watching certain players on a week-to-week basis or whatever. But Tom might fit the bill there. I'm not going to say that Tom is overrated just because I feel like that comes with, well, you're saying he's overrated, that means you think he's bad. Like,
right.
No, I don't
Which is
think
not
he's
the
bad.
case.
No, I don't think he's bad. I don't want him to be replaced. I think a couple of weeks ago on the show, I may have even somewhat advocated for them doing the Bulaga thing and moving him to left tackle once he got an extension if Walker and Morgan were, both losers of the competition in that given case. I don't think that's going to happen either. One guy whose name is going to jump in and again, I'm basing this on, some of this is the perspective, but what's the old Aaron Nagler saying? Overrated depends on who's doing the ratings. So this is based on my perspectives from what I've seen. I think Romeo Doubs fits the bill.
Okay.
People that think, just from the standpoint of like when people are like, oh, he's so much better than like say Christian Watson. Like I don't think there's any question that right now from just a pure talent perspective, and this isn't disrespectful to Doubs, but Doubs, if you were putting the team together through the lens of like the old Perfect Pack Sports Illustrated cover and said like this guy's this guy and this guy's this guy, not perfect comparisons obviously, but Doubs is kind of like James Jones, steady, big target, presence on third downs, make some plays that way. That's all great. Is he going to be is he a $15 million a year receiver, which is kind of the contract that's been buzzed around that maybe he was asking for this offseason? I don't think so. You've got some of the concern with obviously his injuries. He was suspended last year. And from a pure talent perspective, Watson, when he's healthy, is more talented. Wicks and Reed, both more talented. Golden, more talented. And that puts him at fifth at best. And that's depending on how you feel about Savion Williams as a wide receiver prospect. I would put Doubs above him just because I don't know what Williams is yet. But
right.
There are people that think Doubs is like this team's best receiver, and they should have signed him yesterday. So, again, that's just my mentions, my timeline, my comment section, which are awful, ugly places. But I think he fits the bill. To me, he's a good player at a dime a dozen position that I don't think that Green Bay should even, unless he has a season where he goes for like 90 catches and 1,200 yards, I just don't think they should even be entertaining the possibility of a contract extension.
It's interesting, and you bring up a great point of like the lens that you look through. So I actually had Romeo on my underrated list, but the lens that I was looking through had a lot more to do with the people that want to trade him right now. And to me, like, I want Romeo Doubs on this team. I think you are a better version of the Green Bay Packers with him on the team right now. Do you think he has a level of chemistry with Jordan Love? And I just think if all of a sudden you trade him right now, yes, I think eventually you get Christian Watson back. Right now, Watson's out. You have Wicks and Reed, who are both coming off tougher seasons this past year. Then you have two rookies after that, and Savion Williams and Matthew Golden. And I still think there's talent there, and I think you're going to get Watson back. And I still think like Hardman and Heath and Melton, those guys can be back the roster guys. But I just think your depth takes quite a bit of hit at that point. So I'm all for Romeo still being on this team this year, but I don't disagree with anything that you said from your lens and your perspective either.
Yeah, not only that, I always say, cap space and draft picks are great. Those are good resources to have. This is also a team that thinks they can win a Super Bowl this season. So, is this team, like you said, are they better right now with Romeo Doubs? Yeah, I think Romeo Doubs is penciled in as a starter for, 2025. And that obviously is fluid and subject to change with a lot of stuff. But I think if you had me to ask, of the receivers, other than Jaden Reed, who's my best bet to be a starter on the boundary, so taking even Reed out of that, I'd say probably Doubs right now, just because I don't know about Wicks, and we don't know what Matthew Golden is going to do once the rounds are live, so to speak.
Before you came on, again, we're being joined by Jacob Westendorf. You can find him on social media at Jacob Westendorf, and of course, Packers on SI and the Pack a Day podcast. We were talking, or actually, I should say, when we lost you, we were talking a little bit about Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave. Specifically, is Luke Musgrave on that overrated or underrated kind of category, and what he could potentially bring to the team in 2025? I think there's still a lot of hope for Musgrave, but the hope and expectation hasn't exactly matched with the results. A lot of that is injury related. How do you see the targets and sort of the playing time for this tight end position? We know Tucker Kraft is probably going to get fed quite a bit, but how does that affect Luke Musgrave, and how does Musgrave affect Tucker Kraft?
Yeah, so Musgrave's career so far has played out with the concerns that I had of him coming out of college. So when I would talk privately amongst people, or even some of the stuff I put in for the draft guide that we had, was that he's been dinged a lot in college, which he's been hurt a lot in the NFL. Not that that's his fault. I mean, the kidney injury, that unfortunately could have happened to anybody, but he has been injured. and it's more been projection than it has been production. I loved hearing how fast he was during Senior Bowl season and how he made, what was it, like 20-something miles an hour of a full sprint speed. Like, that's all well and good. There's certainly some intriguing skill set that he brings to Green Bay's offense, but it hasn't panned out. I liked a lot. I actually had Tucker Kraft rated ahead of him for that year's tight end crop, along with all the other guys that ended up going before that group. Mostly Sam Laporta was like the guy that I really liked out of that class, just because I like the production, the blocking, all that stuff. Basically, all the stuff that Kraft brings to Green Bay's offense now. I was talking about this with Marcus Eversole the other day about how I'm curious to see how Green Bay wants to deploy their offense, because if they want to live in 11 personnel, then, Luke Musgrave's going to be glued to the bench, I think, because you can't put Tucker Kraft on the bench. If they want to play 12 personnel, which Adam Stenavich has talked about, and this is the part where I'm kind of intrigued, because Stenavich, Matt LaFleur, they've all brought up Musgrave kind of without being asked about Luke Musgrave this offseason. Does that mean something? Does that mean nothing? We'll find out when the pads come on and everything like that. But I do like the idea of being able to play in 12 personnel where Musgrave can stretch the seam, Kraft can run through people's faces, and then the competition on the receiver room by extension gets even more fierce, because in 11 personnel, you got 3 receivers on the field. You bring in another tight end, now there's only 2. So we're fighting and scratching and clawing for a lot of limited opportunities on the field for those receivers. So do you get guys like, I've drawn up in my head the last couple of days of like 12 personnel with Kraft and Musgrave, and then Christian Watson and Matthew Golden, and you got your blend of speed and athleticism with Josh Jacobs in the backfield and the ability with him and Kraft to just kind of run through people. Again, from a conceptual standpoint, you can kind of do whatever you want. The problem, of course, being Musgrave has to be, 1, on the field, and 2, has to be productive when he is on the field, and that just hasn't been a thing. But I will tell you this, Andy, when you go back to Musgrave's rookie training camp, if I had asked you right then, who of the Packers' new offensive players would you bet was going to be one of the studs, I bet you Musgrave would have been on the tip of the tongue, because that was his breakout year. Not breakout year, but he had a big training camp that year. Him and Reed looked like guys that were just going to be instant impact contributors. It just hasn't panned out for whatever reason, and this is a huge year for him. It's his 3rd year. I doubt he gets extended after this upcoming season, but going into the offseason, the Packers are going to be deciding, hey, are you part of our short to midterm future or anything like that, or are we looking for one of your replacements in this upcoming draft class?
I think it's a really interesting year for Luke Musgrave, and I think that the 12 personnel with Musgrave and Kraft, if Musgrave clicks, is by far and away the most interesting formation for Green Bay, because you can basically, again, like you said, it's a 2 tight end set. They come out in a nickel formation. You can run the ball right at them. They come in heavy. You basically just use Luke Musgrave in the slot as a 3rd wide receiver, as a big wide receiver. Kraft is an inline tight end. You could even split all 5 of those guys wide if you wanted to and try to pick on the mismatches. There's so much stuff that you could potentially do with the versatility of Kraft, Musgrave, and Jacobs. Like you said, if you can get Watson and Golden out there with their speed, just even open up stuff for those other 3 guys underneath. I just think there's so much versatility in that formation, and I would love to see it. But as you mentioned, that's predicated upon Luke Musgrave being healthy and him being able to go out there and actually be productive, which this past year was an issue on both sides of that coin. Jacob, I cannot thank you enough. Sorry for any technical issues that we had on our end. What do you want to plug on your way out here?
I actually had a really cool story idea that I just got approved, but it's not coming out until September. So that's a tease for a couple of months from now.
Love that.
But, it's camp preview season. So, breakout players will be talking about overrated, underrated, stuff like that. There's a bunch of stuff that's kind of filed away and getting ready to start making its way out. Because what do we got, Andy? 2 weeks from yesterday was the first day of practice?
Correct. Yep, 2 weeks.
Yeah. So 14. We're down to 13 days now. 13, which is the amount of championships the Packers have won. You may have heard that.
I love that. Are you getting out to camp at all this year, or are you not going to make it until regular season or preseason?
No, I'll be out there. I'm bringing my son the first Sunday, so he and I will be up there with a couple other people, and then I'll be at family night as well. But as far as this stuff, I'm not doing that until the regular season hits.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to it. You do an unbelievable job of covering the Packers. Can't thank you for all of your work on the Pack-A-Day podcast as well. Make sure to follow him at Jacob Westendorf. A huge thank you to him for joining on the Fan Guest Hotline powered by Gruber Law. One call, that's all. We'll talk to you soon, Jacob.
Thanks, Andy. Appreciate it.
Appreciate you. Again, follow him at Jacob Westendorf. This is the Pack-A-Day Radio Show. We'll be right back right after this. Welcome back to the Pack-A-Day Radio Show. A huge thank you to Jacob Westendorf for joining us this past segment. Reminder that the Mason Crosby Show with Mitch Nellis coming up next from 9 to 11. Also, a very important PSA for our listeners. Pack-A-Day Radio Show is also a podcast. So we have the Pack-A-Day podcast and then the Pack-A-Day Radio Show podcast. No, it's very difficult to understand, but there's both of them out there. You can find us anytime on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Catch the full episode, listen by individual hour, or jump straight to the highlights. Just open up your favorite podcast app, search Pack-A-Day Radio Show, hit that follow button so you can get every minute of the show your way and on your time. Make sure that you are hitting that subscribe button, like, comment, give those 5-star reviews where you can as well. All right, what I wanted to talk about here is, well, actually, first of all, Tommy, no leadoff show today. I know that. It always feels like just when the Brewers get insanely hot, it's an off day and then a all-star break, and they just can't keep that momentum. It's the fates of the Major League Baseball. They're cursed, I swear. But no, what an unbelievable series from your Milwaukee Brewers.
Yeah, I mean, awesome. It is like an Avengers type feel of when you need them the most, they vanish. You just want to watch baseball, and there is no baseball on today for the Milwaukee Brewers, but you couldn't have drew it up any better. 4 runs allowed in 3 games against that offense there, obviously highlighted by Jacob Mizorowski having his awesome performance in Game 2, but Jose Quintana shoving yesterday as well. Didn't give up a hit, I think, until the 3rd or 5th inning yesterday. Does that sound right? Yeah, and he was phenomenal, and they fought back, too. They were down in the 9th inning. Andrew Vaughn comes up with the big hit, and then obviously Jackson Chourio in the 10th inning. It was an awesome series, and I do think that they continue to stay hot. Only a game and a half back of the Cubs now here, Andy. First time since April 22nd they've been that close in the division.
Over under on which dates the Brewers acquire Eugenio Suarez. That's my question for you.
I mean, I just don't know. But there should be a lot of pressure on them for a move at the deadline, though, because this pitching staff is playoff ready right now for the Brewers. Andy, at the beginning of the season in April, the average fastball velocity for the Milwaukee Brewers was 93.2 miles an hour. That was the 28th best in Major League Baseball. Now in July, it is 95.3. It's gone up over 2 miles an hour, and it is the 5th best in baseball. We had 2 days ago when Mizorowski played, they had 4 pitchers all throw over 100 in the game. I mean, the staff is electric right now, and everyone's clicking on all cylinders, seems like.
I was going to bring up, I don't have this stat in front of me anymore, but I did see it posted. The Mizorowski, Koenig, Uribe, McGill quadruplets of pitchers in that game. The average fastball or something was like, I want to say like 97 plus on the day, which is the highest for any pitching, group for a single game that they have back in like the stat era, or like however long they've been tracking it or whatever. They think it's the fastest in a game that's probably ever been played for average fastball velocity through the entirety of a game. So just incredible stuff.
Incredible is an understatement. Mizorowski has the fastest fastball velocity of any starting pitcher. He has the fastest curveball velocity of any starting pitcher, and has the fastest slider velocity of any pitcher in Major League Baseball.
It seems good.
I'm
not a baseball expert. That seems good. That seems very, very good. All right, before we get out of here, let's get to our Potawatomi Sportsbook final thought of the day.
You got to do some smart thinking.
It's time for Andy Herman's final thought of the day.
What are you thinking?
Powered by the Potawatomi Sportsbook.
What the hell were you thinking?
You're listening to the Pack-A-Day Radio Show on 1250 AM and 105.7 FM The Fan.
Listen, on any other, Packers conversation on talk radio, podcast, or whatever, you might get a conversation about, here's why the Packers should trade for TJ Watt. Let me get you a conversation topic that's a little bit more up Brian Gutekunst and the Green Bay Packers alley, if you will. Here are the undrafted free agents who could actually make the Packers roster, the 53-man roster this upcoming training camp. So I had this conversation with Justice Mosqueda the other day. I think there's, in my estimate, I think there's 3 players. Maybe there's one other. I'll maybe add an honorable mention here that have a legitimate avenue. I'll just say avenue. I'm not saying that they're good enough or anything like that, but I think there's an avenue for them to make the 53-man roster when you look at these undrafted free agents for Green Bay. And just remember, they've had an undrafted free agent make the team for some like bazillion years in a row. I think it's like 16, somewhere in that range. Nazir Stackhouse is probably number one on that list. You just look at the defensive tackle depth chart, their need for a potential run stuffer. It's a 330-plus pounder. University of Georgia, was expected to be a drafted player, gave him a big-time signing bonus and guaranteed portion of his contract. That, to me, is the easy number one guy on the list. You've got Clark, Wyatt, Wooden, Brooks, Brinson as your top five. And then a bunch of, just unknowns, I'll say, in James Esther, Nesta Jade Silvera, Keith Randolph, and Cameron Young. Nazir Stackhouse, even just with one injury, probably just makes the team. And I think he'll even have the opportunity to compete with everyone on that group. At least the bottom group of Brooks, Wooden, Brinson, just in and of itself. So he has an avenue to make it. The next one I'm going to go with is a offensive guard out of Minnesota, Tyler Cooper. I really like Cooper coming out. They gave him some guaranteed money as well. Was a borderline draftable player. And just when you look at the offensive line, listen, they've got a lot of depth there, a lot of competition. But if they keep somewhere around 10 guys, just in and of itself, there's going to be an avenue for Tyler Cooper to make that team. So he's number 2 on my list. The other one where I just think there's at least an avenue for it, and I'm not saying he's worthwhile, there's a long way to go before we get to that conversation, is Taylor Elgersma, the quarterback. Sean Clifford beating out him is not a big deal. Clifford's already been cut from the team. There's nothing of real value there that we've seen so far. So him jumping to the number 3 quarterback is not unheard of. In fact, I think there's a real strong chance of that happening. Now, making the 53 is different, but if all of a sudden he goes out and has a really strong preseason and Green Bay gets a little trigger shy of being like, hey, I don't think we can cut this guy without him getting claimed, there's at least an off chance that they'd be like, he's just talented enough where we're not going to put it in the ether that he could get claimed from another team and decide to keep him on the 53 that way. The only other one that I would put in that category as a kind of honorable mention is Jamon Johnson, the linebacker. He was a draftable player by most draft guides, and he's a very fun player going back to his earlier days, even at Georgia when he played there. Cooper, Walker, Hopper, McDuffie, Simmons, probably your top 5. If they keep 6 at off-ball linebacker, your battle just comes down to Christian Welch versus Jamon Johnson, which Johnson is younger, quicker, more upside. I think there's a real chance that he could beat him out. So those are my 4 undrafted free agents that I think have a real legitimate shot to make the 53-man roster. Tommy, that is going to do it for us today. No crosstalk today with Mitch, although Mitch is coming up next right here on the Mason Crosby Show from 9 to 11, so do not go anywhere. Huge thank you to Tommy, as always, for running the show on the back end. You can find the Pack-A-Day podcast and now the Pack-A-Day radio show 365 days a year, at least from a Pack-A-Day podcast standpoint, wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Back tomorrow with Jimmy Christensen. This has been the Pack-A-Day radio show. Enjoy your Thursday, and of course, go Pack Go.